Good to see you. Here we go. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berito. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam, oti leolam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai es hashamayim v'et v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi Shabbat v'inafash Shabbat v'inafash v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei b'riah gafen. Amen. L'chaim. Okay, Torah study blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, so good Shabbos. We have a double portion. Like we did last week was Tazria Mitzorah, and now we are up to the double portion of Acharei Mot and Kedoshim. So we're going to start in chapter 17. Chapter 17, verse 8 of Leviticus. We could read the first 7 verses, but we took a long time with the song, so we'll just start with 8. Okay, now we are trying to figure out in Leviticus as Jews how to live with each other, and the different issues that are going to come up and how they're to be adjudicated, whether they're spiritual or practical. But one of the things that is involved that Leviticus points out in a variety of different places is the movement of location from one place to another. And there are 3 locations that Jews either know how to live in, are learning how to live in, or need to know how to live in. And that's Egypt, the wilderness, and what's currently called, where we are in the Torah, Canaan, which will later become Israel. So let me just say that again. When the Jews are in Egypt, there really is no halacha because they're not allowed to be Jewish. It's illegal. They're slaves all day long. And then when they're in the wilderness, they learn how to be Jewish. They learn what the mitzvahs that are expected of them are, and so they're in this learning mode. And some of the mitzvahs that they learn aren't applicable yet because they only work in the land of Israel. Some of them are agricultural that only apply to Israel. And some of them have to do with the Holy Temple, which only applies in Israel. or some of them involve sacrifices, which are done one way in the wilderness, but when they get to Israel, are going to be done a completely different way. So do you see that their mind is sort of all over the place in different systems? First of all, they're learning that there is something called Jewish law that exists. I mean, imagine if you told this to someone. Here's the law, but it's only the law for now, and when you get there, then this law is not going to be that law, it's going to be that law. And you're saying, what's law? Right? So there can be some confusion as to how you do it. The other problems are that things were done differently in different places. There was the Egyptian culture, and there's the Canaanite culture. They're both bad, but for different reasons. And the Jews are going to have to figure out how to navigate living with other people who are sinners, and how to deal with that, and where it affects their life and where it doesn't. So a lot of times you see in the Torah, which is what we're about to look at, don't do like the Egyptians did. Don't do like the Egyptians used to do. Or when you get to Canaan, don't do like you're going to see how the Canaanites do. Now the thing is, the Egyptians were known for sinning in different ways than the Canaanites. And if you don't know what those are, then when God says, don't do like the Egyptians, you don't know what he means. You have to know what it is that they're doing that he doesn't want you to do. And it's not so clear in the Torah who's doing what. But if you can figure that out, then at the end you can learn something, which is our goal today. Okay. Clear so far? It's a little convoluted, but hopefully you're still with me. Yeah? Okay. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to go through two Torah portions, the end of Acharei Mot, and then into the beginning of Kedoshim, to try to put this together. So, chapter 17, Norman, verse 8. Here we go.
Say to them further, if anyone of the house of Israel, of the strangers who reside among them, offers a burnt offering or a sacrifice, and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to offer it to the Eternal, that person shall be cut off from his people. And if anyone of the house of Israel or of the strangers who reside among them partakes of any blood, I will set my face against the person who partakes of the blood. I will cut that person off from among kin. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have assigned it to you for making blood as life that affects expiation. Therefore I say to the Israelite people, no person among you shall partake of blood, nor shall the stranger who resides among you partake of blood. Okay, so the first command here, this is very Kabbalistic, by the way. Kabbalah loves this idea that the soul is housed in the blood, right? This is explained in the Kabbalah. And that's why you have soul in all the parts of your body, because the blood is constantly pumping. I think that's the point of the blood system, is on a spiritual level, is to bring the soul throughout every part of your body all the time. Although it's housed in the heart. The soul is housed in the heart, but it's pumped out. It's Kabbalistic, you can take it or leave it. But it says pretty clearly right here, actually, in verse 11, for the soul of the flesh, right? Listen closely. If you looked in the Hebrew, ki nefesh, right? Nefesh, soul. Because for the soul of the flesh is in the blood. This is not just Kabbalistic. It's right there in the Torah. It's just the Kabbalah explains how it works. And so the soul is housed in the blood. The home of the blood is the heart. And the heart pumps it through the whole body. And that's how you get your soul. So if you say, look, I'm a very soulful person, but I don't really exercise or take care of my feet because there's no soul down there. So then you start to develop like toe fungus. You got to take care of everything. So, all right. So now we're pointing out here, and we don't see this a lot. A lot of times it'll say, "Don't do this," but here it specifically says in verse 10. Any Jew, right? Ish mi Beit Yisrael, a Jew or a person who's Jewish, that's what that means.
or a proselyte. Because a proselyte is coming from a different tradition. And in that different tradition, they may have had different understandings about the blood. And for Jews, when you sacrifice an animal, it was very important that the blood was cared for very carefully and carried in these receptacles that they would throw the blood at the base of the altar, and they had these sewers in the Holy Temple that carried the blood out of the away from the Temple Mount. They actually found those sewers. Archaeologically, you can go and see those sewers that they found from the Holy Temple, and they see where the blood was, where they led to and how the blood was funneled out of the Temple Mount. It's incredible archaeological find. They also found all of the dry blood and animal bones in those sewers all came from kosher animals. That they didn't ever sacrifice animals in the Holy Temple that were differently than the Torah prescribes, which is pretty cool. Okay, so if you just went back to verse 7, I know we started at 8, but just go back to verse 7 for 1 second. It says, "They shall no longer slaughter the sacrifices to the demons after whom they stray." Right? In other words, there is this concept in the ancient Near East of using blood in other types of idolatry, witchcraft, black magic, weird stuff. And what God is afraid of here is that when you bring someone who came from one of those religions that did that weird stuff, they're going to try to bring that stuff into Judaism. And so he says specifically, Jews, don't do that, but also make sure anyone you bring into Judaism knows the blood is super important, not to bring their weird stuff into what we do. Okay? Okay. That's what we have so far. And now we're up to, where do we get to? 15? Well, let's go to, okay, so 13? Okay, Judy, will you pick up? So we're now chapter 17, verse 13. We're just picking up.
"And if any Israelite or any stranger who resides among them hunts down an animal or a bird that may be eaten, he shall pour out its blood and cover it with earth. For the life of all flesh, its blood is its life. Therefore I say to the Israelite people, you shall not partake of the blood of any flesh, for the life of all flesh is its blood. Anyone who partakes of it shall be cut off. Any person, whether citizen or stranger, who eats what has died or has been torn by beasts, shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Then he shall be clean. But if he does not wash his clothes and bathe his body, he shall bear his guilt."
Okay, and that's how chapter 17 ends. But now, as we begin, all of that was sort of a lead up to chapter 18, where we're going to get some very specific references to Egypt and Canaan, and this is what I want to really get into here. Okay, so chapter 18, verse 1.
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, I, the Lord, am your God. You shall not copy the practices of the land of Egypt where you dwelt, or of the land of Canaan to which I am taking you, nor shall you follow their laws. My rules alone shall you observe, and faithfully follow my laws." Okay,
so look what just happened. First of all, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, I am the Lord your God. Now, why do we need that verse? Don't we know that? I mean, can you imagine if Moses comes now to the Jews and says, okay, so we're all, you know how we saw those 10 plagues? And then the sea split, and then God came down and gave us the Torah? Remember that guy? He's God. Oh, wow, what a chiddush, Well, why do we need that? No kidding, of course he's God. Well, what happened at Mount Sinai when they met him? And Rashi explains this, that at Mount Sinai he gave them the mitzvahs. And he said, these are the mitzvahs. So what God is telling Moses to do here is to make a specific connection between the mitzvahs that you're given and the God who gave them to you. Clear so far? Okay, so it's a small point, but it's an important point. Because now, as we go into verse 3, which I really want to try to figure out what verse 3 is saying, what is it that the Egyptians did, and what is it that the Canaanites did that you shouldn't do? What specifically? Okay, so let me just read verse 3. K'maaseh eretz Mitzrayim. So according to what was done in the land of Egypt, asher yashavtem ba, where you just come from, lo tasu, don't do that. Whatever you saw that they were doing, don't do it. Uk'maaseh eretz Canaan. And according to the practice that you will see when you get to the land of Canaan, asher ani mevi etchem, the place that I'm bringing you now, shama, over there, lo ta'asu, don't do, v'chukotehem. And according to the types of laws that they have, lo telechu, don't follow them. So what he's saying is, they have laws over there that you're going to have to go against. Right? Now, what's the difference? In Egypt, you couldn't go against the laws because you weren't free. And I wasn't there to help you. I mean, I was there, but I wasn't making you the sovereign power. When we get to Canaan, I'm going to help you subdue the other people so you don't have to follow their laws if you don't want to. You know, there is a concept in Jewish law called Dina de Malchuta Dina. Anyone ever heard of that? Dina de Malchuta Dina. The law of the land is the law. So, you know, if you're driving here, not on Shabbos, but if you're driving here a different day, and, you know, you're going like 16 miles an hour, which is like 12 miles over the speed limit on Kendall. You know, if you're going any faster than like a turtle walking and you get pulled over. So you say to the cop, I can't follow your stupid law. I need to get to shul. They need me for a minyan, and they're starting right now. The cop's not going to say, oh! It's not going to work. I mean, it might work here because Sharon knows all the cops, but it's probably not going to work. Don't test it. You still have to go 2 miles an hour all the way down Kendall. Takes an hour and a half to get here. But the law, so the laws of the land are the law. Now, if there was a law that went against Torah, you don't have to follow it. If the law said it's illegal to study Torah, then you got to study Torah in private, right? Ask Rabbi Akiva about that. But generally, the Talmud doesn't want all Jews to end up in jail every time we live in the diaspora because, you know, we refuse to obey the speed limit, you know, when we're getting to Minyan. Although most Jews don't go to Minyan, so it's not really a problem. But forget that. Okay, now verse 4. Let me just show you 3 commentaries on verse 3, starting with Rashi. So, do you see, Ken, would you mind reading the 2 Rashis on Leviticus 18:3? And again, I'm trying to figure out with you what was the difference between the sins of Egypt and the sins of Canaan. Okay, here we go.
After the deeds of the land of Egypt shall ye not do. This tells us that the deeds of the Egyptians and the Canaanites were more corrupt than those of all other nations, and that the district of Egypt in which the Israelites had resided, Asher Yishbatambo, was even more corrupt than all the rest of Egypt.
Okay, so the first thing Rashi says is, yeah, we're on the sheet now. The first thing Rashi says is, you know, it's ironic that of all of the places on the globe, the 2 populations that are the most sinful are the place where you're coming from and the place where you're going. The Egyptians and the Canaanites are the most corrupt people on the planet. Okay, so that's the first thing Rashi says. Okay, second one.
Neither shall ye walk in their ordinances, What has Scripture left unsaid when it spoke of the deeds of the Egyptians and Canaanites that it felt compelled to add "Ubechukateham lo telchu"? But by these latter words, it refers to their social customs, things which have assumed for them the character of a law, as, for instance, the frequenting of theaters and race courses.
Okay, what do you think that means? What is Rashi saying here? When Rashi, so in other words, the Torah adds, if you look in verse 3, it says, don't do the stuff, it says, to the place that I will bring you, don't do like they do. But then the last three words in Hebrew of verse 3 add something, and that is, don't follow their laws. But it already said, don't do the stuff that they do, and then it adds, don't follow their laws. Uvechukotehem lo telechu. Which Rashi says, the reason that the Torah adds that is because not only should you not follow their laws, but they also have social norms that are unacceptable for you as Jews. And he gives the example of how they behave in their theaters and race courses, which we can talk about that in a second.
Rabbi, can we assume that all the things that ultimately get listed here are things that they were doing in Egypt or Canaan?
What things that are listed where?
Well, when you start going down.
The rest of the chapter?
Rest of the chapter?
Yeah. We'll get there. Okay. So I didn't want to give it away, but here we go. Let's just point it out because I got a lot of other good material, so I'm not worried. But so what happens is this. This is like a sandwich. You have a group of sins, then you have a comment that says don't do them, and then you have another group of sins. So the first group of sins we already looked at, and they were having to do with blood, but primarily what we're saying is demons, witchcraft, idolatry. Don't do that kind of stuff. Okay? And by the way, there were many places where Jews, were forced to bow down to idols and, all this stuff. And that was the deal with Mordecai. He was the one guy who refused to bow down. And the same thing with Abraham. He refused to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's idol. And Nebuchadnezzar threw him in the fiery furnace, and he emerged unscathed, and then learned how to ride a camel. Remember that story? No, I didn't tell you that one? So when I was in Charlotte, I was at this, there was this guy who used to teach me Talmud, because I didn't learn it in rabbinic school. That's also a joke, but I went to HUC, what are you going to do? So I really wanted to improve my Talmud, because I wasn't happy with what I learned there, so I would go meet with him every single day, and he'd teach in the morning before work, he would teach me Talmud. And one time he had these 3 students in from Jerusalem, and this was back when I still sort of believed some of the stuff that I learned in Reformed theology in rabbinic school, and I was arguing with them that the Torah was anachronistic because Abraham is always riding camels, but camels hadn't been domesticated yet at that point in history, and which was proven by archaeologists. Because, what a stele is? A stele is a plaque that a king writes that brags about, I've got this many camels and this many chariots and this many soldiers. But no one in the time of Abraham ever bragged about having camels. So they said they must not have been riding camels anymore at that point yet. It would be like if you wrote in the Torah that Abraham was driving a Ferrari. But they didn't exist yet, so you know that it must have been written later and so forth. So, by the way, it's been, even this famous archaeologist who's a minimalist, Israel Finkelstein, wrote this in a book, but years after he published that book, they found a stele in Syria of a king who existed before Abraham who had camels. But I didn't know that at the time. So I said this to these 3 yeshiva boys. And one of them looked at me and I said, the Torah is anachronistic because Abraham didn't ride camels. And he said, Abraham survived the fiery furnace of Nebuchadnezzar. And you don't think he could have figured out how to ride a camel? And I said, Well, when you put it like that, I guess maybe he could have figured it out. Smartest guy ever lived to actually talk to God, but getting on the camel and figuring out how to do it, that was beyond what he... Okay, so, but the rabbi said to me, "Hey," he's like, "you Reformed Jews are still with the camels. Like, enough. They found the camel." Okay, whatever. That was one of those things I thought, I've told that story so many times, I could just say the punchline and we could move. All right, like dancing. All right, could lead to dancing. All right. See? That's what I hope the camels were. Okay, so the Ibn Ezra is not so interesting. Let's go right to, by the way, okay, so the first sins are all the stuff with the idolatry and stuff. Then you get this bizarre comment in the beginning of chapter 18, don't do like the Egyptians and don't do like the Canaanites. And if we keep reading now, through the rest of chapter 18, we're going to get all the laws of forbidden relationships, incest, don't marry your cousin, all that stuff. There's a whole list of them. That's what we're going to get. And so the question we ask is, were the Canaanites more involved with the idolatry or the sexual immorality? And were the Egyptians more involved with the idolatry or the sexual immorality? Now, it's fair to say that both of them did both. But one of them was more well known for idolatry, and one of them was more well known for sexual immorality. So in order to try to understand that, we need Nachmanides. So if you look at the third source on the first sheet, Ramban. Ed, would you mind reading the Ramban according to?
According to the opinion of Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra, the scriptural command, after the doings of the land of Egypt, shall ye not do, is a reference to the practice of sacrificing to the demons mentioned above. And after the doings of the land of Canaan, shall ye not do, is an allusion to the forbidden sexual relationships, in which the Canaanites were very bad and sinful, as he stated at the end of this section. For all these abominations have the men of the land done.
Okay, so all we've heard so far is Nachmanides says, here's what Ibn Ezra thinks. Now, whenever he says, here's what Ibn Ezra thinks, what's he going to say next?
I don't agree.
Here's why he's wrong. Very good. Yeah, Elena?
Sorry, maybe a question, just clarifying. We're still in the woods. This is all happening. We haven't met the Canaanites yet. We're hearing about
Correct.
them before we meet them.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the question is, have we met the Canaanites yet? The answer is no. And we won't until the Torah ends. Because the Jews never get to Israel under Moses. They die before, the Torah ends before they go in. Then the Torah ends, Joshua picks up and they go in. And the walls come tumbling down and so forth. But good point, we're not going to meet them the whole Torah. Although some of them sort of come and go, like Bilam. Bilam had been in Israel and now he wanders around. So there are people who've come and gone, but we don't meet the whole nation. Okay, so now what Ramban has pointed out so far is, and you probably knew this, right? Have you heard this before, that Egypt was the den of idolatry? That Egypt had more gods and more idolatry and more practices worshiping other gods than anywhere else in the world. That's a known fact. Okay? Which means then, that by reason of deduction, what's going on in Canaan is going to be pretty weird. People are married to monkeys and, who knows, there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. All these sexual relationships that are forbidden is happening in Canaan. That's what Nachmanides says, Ibn Ezra thinks. Okay, that's what we have so far. Okay, Ed?
And in the opinion of our rabbis in the Torah Kohanim, the Egyptians were also addicted to carnality.
Okay, so what is Torat Kohanim? Remember, every book of the Torah has a nickname. Okay, Genesis, Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation. Exodus, the book of Exodus, the book of redemption. Leviticus, the laws of the priests. The way you say laws of the priests in Hebrew? Torat Kohanim. So Torat Kohanim here is a nickname for Leviticus. Numbers is Bamidbar. It's the stories of the wilderness. And Deuteronomy is known as Mishneh Torah, the repetition of the Torah, because Moses is repeating all the laws before they enter in. So just so you know, every book of the Torah has a nickname, and when it says Torah Kohanim, it's using the nickname of Leviticus here. Okay.
So the Egyptians were also addicted to carnality in all forms of the forbidden relationships and with males and cattle. This is the truth, as Scripture states, that there were also sodomites in the land, referring to the abominations of the nations, which were there from the beginning till now.
Right, so in other words, like, if you're grading the Canaanites with regard to idolatry, you give them like a D+. But with regard to sexual immorality, they get an F-. And vice versa with Egypt. They're horrible at everything, but they're really specialized in being terrible at idolatry. And the Canaanites really specialize in being terrible at sexual immorality, but they're both bad at both. Okay. That's what he's saying there. Okay.
Scripture further testifies concerning them, the Egyptians thy neighbors, great of flesh, and it further says, whose flesh is as the flesh of asses, and whose issue is like the issue of horses, the term flesh being a euphemism for the sexual organ. Similarly, in the expression, his flesh ran with his issue, and her issue and her flesh be blood, the term flesh is an allusion to the sexual organ.
Okay, so we see, though, if there's one thing that we know is for sure, that when we go back to, because we just read, we didn't read Ibn Ezra, but Nachmanides summarized Ibn Ezra. So we just looked at 3 commentaries on chapter 18, verse 3. And chapter 18, verse 3 specifically says, and really only says, don't do like the Egyptians and the Canaanites. Now, it doesn't matter which one did which, but this is the part of the Torah where God is commanding the Jews, you're gonna see what these other people are prolific at. And it happens to be sexual immorality and idolatry. And by the way, there are 3 cardinal sins in Judaism. These are 2 of the 3. What's the other one? Murder. Very good. Now, what's the difference between a cardinal sin and all the other sins? Anyone remember? So the Talmud explains that there's 3 cardinal sins. Idolatry, sexual immorality, or murder. And a cardinal sin means if someone comes to you and says, commit this act or I'm going to kill you. Like, go kill that person or I'll kill you. You should give up your life for it. For any other sin, you should not. If someone says, go steal a pack of gum or I'm going to kill you, steal the gum. Right. But these 3 sins are so bad that you should be willing, if someone says, go rape that person or I'm going to kill you, you have to give up your own life. That's a cardinal sin. And there are only 3. Okay. So, murder, different types of sexual immorality that the Torah describes, and idol worship. Those are considered the 3 worst sins. Now, you can debate that if you want, but that's just what that's what the Talmud argues. It's just ironic here that we have here 2 of the 3. Okay. By the way, you saw all 3 at the golden calf. If you look according to the Talmud, they were, having like an orgy of some sort. People were getting killed. Hor was killed, right? Miriam's son, and they were obviously worshipped idols. So you had all 3 there, right? Okay. So now let's go on and see, what does this mean, sexual immorality? When we say sexual immorality, what does it mean? So let's, now we're up to Joe, verse 4. Verse 4.
My rules alone shall you observe, and faithfully follow my laws. I, the Lord, am your God. You shall keep my laws and my rules, by pursuit of which man shall live. I am the Lord. None of you shall come near anyone of his own flesh to uncover their nakedness. I added that. I am your Lord. Your father's nakedness, that is the nakedness of your mother, you shall not uncover. She is your mother, you shall not uncover her nakedness. Do not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is the nakedness of your father. The nakedness of your sister, your father's daughter, or your mother's, whether born into the household or outside, do not uncover their nakedness. The nakedness of your son's daughter or of your daughter's daughter, do not uncover the nakedness, for their nakedness is yours. The nakedness of your father's wife's daughter, who was born into your father's household, she is yours. Sounds like Monty Python. Your sister, do not uncover her nakedness. Do not uncover the nakedness of your father's sister, she is your father's flesh. Do not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, for she is your mother's flesh. Do not uncover the nakedness of your father's brother. Do not approach the wife, she is your aunt.
All right, I mean, you're starting to get the idea? Okay, I mean, we could go through them all, but don't do these things.
The one about the nakedness of your father's wife's daughter,
Which verse are you looking at?
11.
Okay.
Wait a minute. So that's the first cousin?
Nakedness
No. What is that?
your father.
Oh, okay. Because I know a lot of people back in the past generations where the first cousins married. Is that in here somewhere or no?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're all in. I mean, they're all in here. There's a lot of them. Now, you know, when it says, okay, well, I think this is all pretty explanatory. I don't need to explain this to you. Yeah, these are, whatever it is, I don't know. You guys, you can Google the chart. But just try to marry someone who's not, you know, related to you. All right.
But that didn't happen in the shtetls.
They did the best they could. Okay. Good question. Good question. You shall not take a wife to her sister. So now, what happened with, how did the rabbis deal with Rachel and Leah? So Rachel and Leah were sisters. Now, first thing you could say is Torah didn't exist at that point. Jacob didn't get the Torah. But the rabbis have a problem with that because it is understood that the matriarchs and patriarchs, through prophecy, knew all of the commandments. So, what Jacob did was problematic. But he had to marry Rachel because we needed to produce all of the 12 tribes, and they were going to come from her too. Now, the way the rabbis explain how Jacob could do that, if you are going to concede that the matriarchs and patriarchs knew all of the mitzvahs, and Jacob would have known this, they can say, yeah, but some of the mitzvahs only pertain inside the land of Israel. And he married her in Haran, which was outside the land of Israel. But what happens when they go back to Israel? Rachel dies at the border. That marriage won't exist in the land of Israel. It can't. Because that sin can't. It's permissible outside the land of Israel, but not inside the land of Israel. Now, there are plenty of things like that. Most of them are agricultural. Things that you don't have to do with your agriculture. By the way, I used to think that when you plant a tree in Israel, you're not allowed to have the fruit for the first 3 years. That's called orla. And I used to think that only existed in Israel, but according to the Talmud, it's outside of it. That particular agricultural mitzvah is outside the land of Israel too. When you plant a tree, you're not supposed to eat from the fruit of it for 3 years, even outside the land of Israel. Now, you don't have to be as medakdek, as, I don't know how to strict, fastidious, outside the land of Israel as you do inside the land of Israel, but you're still not, that's one of those agricultural laws that does carry outside the land of Israel, but there's some that do and some that don't. So this was one that once you're in the land of Israel, and from the point that the Jews settle the land of Israel forward, so you can't say, well, I live in Miami, I could marry 2 sisters. No. Once we established Israel, that rule went into effect for everywhere.
What about Abraham marrying Sarah's half-sister?
So it was different back then because they were the only people in the world who weren't idol worshipers. And they didn't have much of a choice. Same thing with Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel married their sisters. But it was either that or the giraffes. I mean, there was nobody else. There was no one around. You know, we could have had more Jewish basketball players had they done that, but I'll be here all week. All right, let's forget about that for a second. This is not, I didn't want to really go so much in this direction, but let me just say this. We're pointing out, if we were going to ask the question, is it the Egyptians who are more with the idolatry or the Canaanites? Or is it the Canaanites who are more with the sexual immorality, the uncovering, the nakedness stuff, or the Egyptians? The answer has already been answered for us. But we have to go back to Genesis. So if you'll jump back with me now, I think you're going to be blown away by this when you see this. If you come back with me now to Genesis chapter 9, verse 22. Genesis chapter 9, verse 22. If anyone has the page, you could shout it out. Page 68. Okay. Bill, do you have it? Okay, so we're up to verse 22. Now, this is where, just to give you a framework, we are dealing with Noah and what happens after the flood. Okay, this is going to sound familiar to you, but it may also bring Leviticus 18 to make more sense. Okay, here we go.
Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his two brothers outside.
Okay, so do you see what happened? Ham, Noah had three sons. Shem, Ham, and Japhet. Shem's the good one. Japhet's the sort of like the simple son. But Jaffa becomes famous for the city of Jaffa. And Ham is the bad one. Ham has a son named Canaan. All right, we're talking about the Canaanites. Canaan is the son of the guy who saw his father's nakedness. Now watch what happens. What does that have to do with the Canaanites down the road? Okay, so let's read verse 23.
But Shem and Japheth took a cloth, placed it against both their backs, and walking backwards, they covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned the other way, so that they did not see their father's nakedness.
Okay, two more incredible verses now.
When Noah woke up from his wine and learned what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves, shall he be to his brothers."
Okay, now, Canaan didn't do anything. Look, go back to verse 22. Ham, the father of Canaan, did it. Canaan's not even around that we know of. But when we get to verse 25, it says, "Cursed be Canaan." Why? So according to the rabbis, because Noah had a prophecy that it wasn't just Ham, that all his descendants were going to be sexually immoral. Meaning that the Canaanites are going to be sexually immoral. And now chapter 18 of Leviticus makes more sense. You see that? Isn't that incredible? Okay. Now, we also know that Egypt is the den of idolatry. Because that's why we had to have 10 plagues. Because each one of the plagues was meant to take out something that the Egyptians thought was a god. We started with their god of water, with the blood turning to water. We ended with the sun god, like the plague of darkness. And then Pharaoh thinking himself was a god, living on through his firstborn son. So he had to kill the first. Every plague was meant to take out something that they thought were a god. We know that Egypt's all about idolatry, and now we know that Canaan is all about sexual immorality. And we also know that the Jews are leaving that and going to that. Okay. Now, So look at a couple of sources on the back. The Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi, medieval Spanish rabbi. Who's it? Hillary, would you mind reading where it says he cursed Canaan?
He cursed Canaan by invoking his prophetic vision so that his curse would take lasting effect. All the patriarchs were extremely careful not to marry women descended from these cursed tribes. Abraham had already warned Eliezer, his servant, against taking a wife from these tribes for Yitzchak, and so Yitzchak, as well as Rivka, expressed their opposition to such liaisons.
Okay, so that was kind of just what I was pointing out. But if you'll skip with me now, back to the beginning of the second Torah portion this week, Kedoshim. So we're just going to wrap up with this. The last time I'll ask you to skip, but Leviticus 19:1. This is one of the most famous verses in the whole Torah. We read it on the High Holy Days as well. Leviticus 19:1. And actually, 19:1 is not very famous. 2 is the... What is it? 894. Okay, Jason, would you mind reading 19:1 and 19:2?
Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the entire assembly of the children of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for holy am I, Hashem, your God."
Right, and this is what we read in the afternoon of Yom Kippur. Right, where we say, you shall be holy, because that's the moment when we're the holiest. Right, when we're the purest, is as we're getting towards the end of closing of the gates on Yom Kippur. But my question now is, as the Jews are going forward, at this moment, the Torah portion is called Kedoshim, holiness. This is when we become a holy people, right here. How do we know that? Because look what it says in verse 2. Speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, from this point forward, Kedoshim Tihiyu is in the future tense. Kedoshim Tihiyu, you shall be Kedoshim, holy. Ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokechem, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Now, holy really in Hebrew means separate from everyone else, right? When the people of Israel are holy because they're separate from all the other nations. Shabbat is holy because it's separate from all other days. When a couple gets married, it's called kiddushin because they're now forbidden to anyone else. They're separate to each other. So that's kind of what it means. And here God's saying, I'm separating you from the Egyptians and the Canaanites. They're the worst of the worst, right? And if you can handle yourselves with them, you'll be able to handle yourselves wherever you go. But there's something very interesting here that I think is taking place that I want to just point out to end. And that is that the holiness of the Jewish people comes once the Jews leave Egypt, but are preparing to enter the land of Israel. And there's a reason that has to happen. Because there's a verse in the Torah that says, if you don't, forget the verse, but if you don't follow God in the land of Israel, the land will vomit you out. Have you ever heard that before? The land will spit you out. Okay, so what that means is, and it also says, God tells Abraham in Genesis, there's a famous verse that says, the iniquity of the Amorites is a synonym for Canaanites, the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. And what that means is that you Jews can't go live in Israel yet because there are people who are living there. And I'm not going to take away the land from anyone unless they deserve it. And so when it says the iniquity is not yet complete, it means that the people who are living there have not yet met their threshold. But once they do reach their threshold of sins, they'll be kicked out. And when did it just so happen that they met their threshold? When the Jews were on their way. Which is why God had to wait for the right moment to bring them out of Egypt and take them to Israel, because they had nowhere to go until the land was ready for them. So now they're on their way, and the people there are going to be kicked out, not because the Jews are coming, but because they deserve to for their sins. because the land can't tolerate them anymore. But here you have in Canaan these people who are sinning at the same level that the Egyptians are sinning in Egypt. But what's the difference? The Egyptians will never get kicked out of Egypt. They could sin there all the livelong day. They can be horrible. They can sing to demons with their blood while they're marrying their fourth cousin at the bar mitzvah of a horse. Who knows? And do whatever they want. And they were. But the Egyptians are never going to get kicked out of Egypt. But if the Canaanites pull this stuff in Canaan, they're out. And by the way, when you Jews get there and you pull this stuff, you're out too, which happened to us twice, right? In 586 BCE and in 70 CE, God said, you've met your threshold, the temple's coming down, and you're out. Good luck in Babylonia. Good luck in the diaspora. And it hasn't gone that well. Right. Okay. Now, what then can we say? There's no difference between the Egyptians and the Canaanites. They're both evil. God says here, whether you're going or coming, you're going from the worst to the other worst. They're both terrible. But the Egyptians, I'll leave them where they are. The Canaanites have to go. So, the answer is, the people are the same. The Canaanites and Egypt are the same. But the land itself is different. The land of Israel in and of itself is sensitive and can't tolerate the sins. Does that make sense? And so if you don't figure out what it means to be kadoshim tihiyu, if you don't figure out what it means to be holy, then this whole enterprise is going to fall apart. You're going to be kicked out of the land of Israel. So then what can we say? And this is sort of what I wanted to be able to wrap up with and have you walk out of here by saying is, from this point forward, when we say the famous part of the Torah, you shall be holy for I, the Lord your God, am holy, what does that mean? It doesn't mean just follow the mitzvahs. It means not only do you have to follow the mitzvahs, but you're going to live in places where they have movie theaters and where they have horse races and where they have places where people who aren't Jewish gather. And in those places, there's going to be social norms that don't conform with the Torah. And there'll be things in your places that you live, whether you're in the land of Israel or out of the land of Israel, where people are going to be doing things that could affect the way that you do things. And boy, American Jews do stuff that Americans do. And German Jews do stuff that Germans do. And Hungarian Jews do stuff. I could go on and on, right? But a lot of those things could very much be counter the wisdom of the Torah. And if you allow those things to get into your norms, you may survive in the diaspora, but I'm telling you right now, the Holy Land is more sensitive than all of the other lands. The land actually has feeling to it. And if you behave this way when you get to the land of Israel, then things in the land of Israel are going to go terribly for you. And sadly, this comes true. Sadly, we did get kicked out 2 times because we brought in the norms of other people. So kadoshim tihiyu, in the final analysis, for a Jew to be holy means to remember that I, the Lord, am your God. God's the one who was with us at Mount Sinai and said, these aren't just the rules of how to adjudicate cases as you go through life. These are the rules on how you're supposed to behave and live and act and remain moral in the societies wherever you happen to find yourself. But if you happen to find yourself in the land of Israel and you pull this stuff, you're going to be out just like the Canaanites were. Okay. Shabbat shalom.
Why in the diaspora?
Check, 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 check.